Daily news and analysis. We keep you informed and inspired.
This is World Today.
Hello and welcome to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Coming up, Xi Jinping and Donald Trump held a phone call and discussed Taiwan. China launches first emergency mission to its Tiangong space station. Goldman Sachs is forecasting that China's economy will grow faster than expected in 2026. And Sudan's Rapid Support Forces announced a unilateral 3-month humanitarian ceasefire in civil war. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. First up, Chinese President Xi Jinping has outlined China's principled position on the Taiwan question in a phone call with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump. The Chinese leader stressed that Taiwan's return to China is an integral part of the post-war international order, adding that China and the United States should jointly safeguard the victory of World War II. President Xi Jinping also called on the two countries to keep up the momentum in bilateral ties and to keep moving forward in the right direction on the basis of equality, respect, and mutual benefit. For his part, President Donald Trump said he fully shares the Chinese president's comments regarding the bilateral ties, noting that the United States understands the importance of the Taiwan question to China. So for more, joining us now on the line are Professor Shending Li from the Institute of International Studies, Fudan University, as well as Mr. Sultan Ali, a China observer and a retired Air Force officer in Pakistan. So thank you very much for joining us today, Professor Shen and Sultan. Professor Shen, to start with you, the phone call between President Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump came as China is lodging serious protests with Japan over its prime minister's recent provocative remarks on the Taiwan question. Now, first of all, what is your understanding of Xi Jinping's point that Taiwan's return to China is an integral part of the post-war international order?
First, this is a fact. During the Second World War time, China, US, and the then Soviet Union, etc., are part of the Allied force. They worked together to beat global fascists, including Nazi Germany and imperialist Japan. So China, US were wartime ally, worked together to defeat Japan and created the post-Second World War order. America is a chief leader, but after that, the U.S. has sort of shifted its position to protect Taiwan, preventing China from being reunified. So China wants to remind America that America has certain responsibility to defend this post-Cold War order. America has created it. America should be responsible for defending it. When the current Japanese prime minister trying to sabotage such a world order in which Japan has relinquished, has abandoned Taiwan, and Japan should let Taiwan to be reverted to China. But the current Japan prime minister said Japan may send its self-defense force if there is some issue in Taiwan happening that would jeopardize Japan's survival. So China asks the U.S. to remember its responsibility and again to work with China to disallow Japan, try to create a certain history revisionism. We don't want to have the revisionism. We want to protect the order that has been built from defeating Japan's wartime crime.
So, Sultan, on the part of the Japanese government, does an indication about possible military intervention in the Taiwan question represent violation of the post-war international order?
Well, of course, Japan's indication of possible military intervention in the Taiwan question raises serious concerns about breaching the post-war international order. That order had forged through the Cairo and Potsdam declarations, and it emphasized the restoration of territories, including Taiwan, to China, and committed Japan to a pacifist path rather than path of confrontationism, which I'm afraid Sanai Takachi is trying to lead her country into. Now, you see, by signaling readiness for military involvement, Tokyo is risking undermining both its constitutional commitments and the regional stability, which has been anchored in the post war agreements. This should not be taken lightly because it shifts Japan from a defensive posture to a potentially provocative one. And we cannot afford to do that because it could escalate tensions and erode the very framework which was designed to prevent conflict in East Asia. By signaling military involvement in the Taiwan question, Japan is risking destabilizing the delicate balance of alliances in East Asia. Such a shift could drag the US into a more confrontational posture, heightening the risk of miscalculation with China and fracture the cooperative frameworks that have underpinned regional stability since the post-war era. Japan's move is not just a legal or historical breach, but it is a strategic gamble that could unsettle both Washington's balancing act and the broader security architecture.
Now, Professor Shending Li, China hopes that the U.S. and China can jointly safeguard the outcomes of the victory of the Second World War, including Japan's post-war pacifist constitution and Taiwan's return to China from Japan's colonial rule. So what do you make of the reasons that the U.S. should do so today?
As I mentioned earlier, the US-China jointly created the post-Cold War order with which Japan abandoned Taiwan, and Taiwan has been reverted to China. But currently, America has been the root cause of this Taiwan issue. US used to deploy armed force in Taiwan and deploy nuclear weapon in Taiwan and used to support Taiwan to harass the mainland. America renormalized official relationship with the mainland, but still has its lingering political and strategic military relationship with Taiwan, selling weapons to Taiwan and advising Taiwan how to defend Taiwan. Without Americans, such a kind of not be bound by its commitment to China through normalization. Japan would not be able to have such a kind of irresponsible speech by its current prime minister. And actually, the last president, Joe Biden, spoke openly for 5 times. Each time he said, if Taiwan would have some issue, the US military would be involved. That is the same as the current Japanese prime minister said. If Taiwan has something, that Japan's military would be involved. So Japan is just trying to repeat what the US president has stated. The fundamental problem is not with Japan, but with America, with the last US president, not the current US president. Current US president have not made that clear. If Taiwan would have some issue, US military would be involved. The US-Taiwan Relation Act stipulated that if Taiwan would have something, America as a nation would be involved, which naturally include the component of US military. But the US law has never made it that clear US military would be involved. But the last US president has made it clear US military would be involved. When President Trump in his current administration asked the question, what the US would respond if Taiwan would have something. He said, I know, my cabinet know, but you journalists have no right to ask me. You have no right to know my answer. His answer may be, we would not defend Taiwan. That would be best. His answer may be, we would defend Taiwan, but he is smart not to speak out. But recently he visited Japan. He had a meeting with Japanese Prime Minister. He said, tell me whatever you need. We would give you whatever you need. Which means if Japan's military would be involved in a Taiwan contingency, American military would be involved. So President Xi Jinping's phone call to Trump, I think, is to prevent him from speaking openly to side with Japan. So this is a preventive call to prevent Trump from speaking openly, repeating what Biden has stated. That would make a clear U.S.-Japan alliance partnering with Taiwan in a Taiwan contingency. So I think that's the purpose to make Trump not to speak openly.
So, Sultan, President Trump told President Xi Jinping in this phone call that the U.S. understands the importance of the Taiwan question to China. What messages do you read from the U.S. president's comment here?
Well, you see, one thing you must appreciate, Han, that President Trump, end of the day, is not a statesman like President Xi. In fact, he is a commercial manager. He is a tradesman, and he likes to weigh, profit and loss. But having said that, please, what I read from all this is that the President of the United States of America, despite his provocative statements in the past targeting China, he is not ready to throw China under the bus just for the sake of defending either Taiwan or Japan. So President Trump's comment that the US understands the importance of the Taiwan question to China, it carries several messages. First, it signals recognition of China's core concern that Taiwan is not a peripheral issue, but it is central to its sovereignty and national identity. Second, it reflects a pragmatic attempt to stabilize ties. And then it acknowledges China's position, and Washington thus reduces the risk of miscalculation, and it keeps its channel open for cooperation on trade and global issues. Now, thirdly, it underscores the US balancing act, reassuring China of its awareness while maintaining strategic ambiguity towards Taiwan. In a sense, Trump's words show that US is willing to engage China on its terms, even if it does not alter its own policy. And that acknowledgement alone can be a powerful diplomatic gesture. This frames Trump's remarks as recognition, pragmatism, and strategic signaling. Now, three clear points that resonate well are that acknowledgement by President Trump is more than diplomatic courtesy. It ties directly back to safeguarding the post-war order, because recognizing Taiwan's place in that settlement of Japan's Pacific commitments is essential to preserving the stability born out of World War II. And this connects the US recognition of China's concerns with the larger theme of upholding historical agreements and preventing revisionism.
Professor Shending Li, considering the momentum in the China-U.S. relationship after this recent summit between the two presidents in Busan, South Korea, in the days ahead, how would you expect President Trump and his administration to respond to the current diplomatic row between China and Japan over Sanai Takaichi's recent Taiwan comments?
I think for America, they try to focus their domestic agenda. They try not to invite trouble wherever around the globe. So America want to settle the Ukraine-Russia war business and try to forge a peace between India and Pakistan, between Hamas and Israel, and in Africa, etc. And the U.S. does not want to create a crisis in Taiwan Strait. America may not abandon its responsibility to sort of defend Taiwan, but America hate Taiwan would provoke a crisis. For instance, would announce a de jure independence. And America does not want Japan to say nonsense. Japan can work with U.S. to defend Taiwan, but before that would be decided, never say that. Trump does not say that. Trump wants to assure Japan that Japan would be secure. But Trump would hate if Japan would pull the U.S. to plunge into the warfare, to say unnecessary to bring U.S. trouble. So Trump must be not happy for Japanese Prime Minister's irresponsible remarks. Probably would caution Japan, don't repeat those unnecessary nonsense. That created more trouble rather than more peace and stability. And the U.S. want to make sure every day toward Trump's next April's visit to China, U.S. and China could make their better relationship in strategic mineral, in chips, in various trade dispute to iron out those challenges. So China would buy more U.S. soybean, and China would approve U.S. Request for purchasing China's rare earth metal. So U.S. does not want Taiwan to make trouble, hate Japanese to make trouble. U.S. would defend Japan anyway, but don't offend China unnecessarily. I think this might be on the agenda of the White House, and similarly, China does not want to have trouble in this region. We want to have a predictable, smooth relationship with the U.S. So over time, largely for the next 3 years of the remaining time of President Trump, China-US relationship would be stable. So we would work with the US together to stress our common goods in order to shape the region, including the fact of Japan to work for the region major benefits, rather than to allow Japanese Prime Minister to speak erroneously.
So, by the way, Professor Shen, how do you view Japan's plan to deploy missiles on an island near Taiwan? Will this risk further escalating regional tensions or even provoking real military confrontation?
This is politically quite provocative because Japan's short-range missile 100, 200 kilometers can play a certain role in affecting regional stability and peace. But I think mostly it's political. Technically speaking, Japan has made its new law to allow Japan to acquire, to build, to purchase up to 1,000 medium-range ballistic missile. 1,000枚中导. Japan would buy American Tomahawk for 500 missiles, and Mitsubishi would research and develop and build another 500. The definition of medium-range missile means those missiles with a range between 500 kilometers to 5,000 kilometers. With that much longer range, Japan can deploy this medium-range missile anywhere in Japan that could still have the lethality to affect peace and stability in this region. So I think a more serious situation lie ahead. This is just an opening of Japan's returning to the frontier to help America in making the Taiwan Strait security relationship more complicated.
So, Sultan, in the meantime, we have seen a very senior official from Taiwan's DPP authorities just making this comment that Taiwan is the world's Taiwan and reunification with the Chinese mainland is not an option for Taiwan, quote unquote. Is it a good idea for Taiwan's DPP authorities to make any noises now to hint at pursuing Taiwan independence?
Well, please remember, it is neither wise nor constructive for Taiwan's DPP authorities to make noises hinting at independence. Such rhetoric directly contradicts not only the post-war international order, which recognized Taiwan's return to China, but it risks inflaming tensions at a moment when stability is urgently needed. By portraying Taiwan as the world's Taiwan, the DPP is attempting to internationalize what is fundamentally a sovereignty issue, something to which the US itself is a signatory. And the Japan governments in the past have been respecting this position. But now this kind of movement only provokes confrontation and undermines peace. Please remember, China is strong enough, but it is not irresponsible, but it is going to wait on debate and give negotiation a chance. But you see, this kind of moves from Taiwan is far from strengthening Taiwan's security, and these statements isolate it diplomatically and heighten the risk of miscalculation. In short, hinting at independence is a dangerous gamble. It destabilizes the region. It erodes the very framework designed to prevent conflict. That kind of rhetoric from Taiwan's DPP only reinforces why US-China cooperation is essential. Because when Washington and Beijing act together, they can neutralize destabilizing voices, and keep the peace anchored in the post-war order. Peace is the true legacy of the World War II victories, a legacy that China and the United States share, and they must continue to safeguard it together.
I take your point. And also, Sultan, in your opinion, is the risk regarding the resurgence of Japanese militarism real for this region? And do you think there are signs that Japan's right-wing political forces are treating this Taiwan question as a sort of leverage to try to advance the resurgence of Japanese militarism?
Yes, indeed, the risk of a resurgence of Japanese militarism is real. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's remarks suggested that Japan could intervene militarily if China moved against Taiwan. Now, and it is framing it as a survival-threatening situation. But Chinese officials have called this crossing a red line. And there is definite proof of right-wing revisionism because commentaries in Chinese media, we notice, argue that Takaichi's rhetoric reflects a deeper far-right mindset that idolizes Japan's militarist past, using Taiwan as a pretext to justify military expansion. And then there is a strategic pretext. By portraying Taiwan as a direct threat to Japan's survival, right-wing forces are creating a justification for expanding military capabilities beyond defensive limits. By linking Taiwan to Japan's security allows Tokyo to argue for stronger US backing and reinterpretation of Article 9 of its own pacifist constitution. Then there are domestic politics. Nationalist rhetoric around Taiwan resonates with right-wing constituencies. It is helping push defense budgets and missile deployments that would otherwise face resistance. Missile deployments, as we discussed a little earlier, near Taiwan and rhetoric about intervention risk provoking countermeasures from China, raising the chance of military confrontation and, of course, undermining the post-war order. Japan's pacifist constitution was a cornerstone of the post-World War II settlement. Any move towards militarism erodes that framework and destabilizes East Asia. And of course, there is an alliance strain. US strategic ambiguity could be tested if Japan pushes for a more aggressive role, complicating Washington's balancing act between Tokyo and Beijing.
So, over the longer term, Professor Shen, how would you rate the importance of stable China-U.S. relations to maintaining regional peace and stability in this East Asian region?
Fundamentally, China should build its own capacity. Even with the U.S. interference, joint U.S.-Japan interference, China is still able to defend its legitimate interest to reunify with Taiwan. Now we ask America to work with us to dissuade Japan. Fundamentally, China should have the ability to handle America and Japan together. So my feeling is China should build up, invest more on its science, technology, education, etc., and to make the U.S. to think about this issue more seriously. America, if it would challenge China's interest, America would not have a chance to succeed. And I think this is more fundamental. Rather than talking to America, you should talk to Japan. We need to not to talk to America and Japan. And we are more powerful than the combination of America and Japan. I think that's most important. Short of this, we need to tactically work with America to remind America's morality, its legal responsibility. But this is also to expose our vulnerability to America. China should be confident, China should build its own competence, and China should teach America and Japan they have the vulnerability vis-a-vis China's competence. So this is what I want to say. But as I said, failing this, at the moment, we still need to tactically talk to America, but never expect America to have certain kind of mercy toward us.
Your point's well taken. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. Professor Shending Li from the Institute of International Studies, Fudan University, and Sultan Ali, a China observer and a retired Air Force officer in Pakistan. You are listening to World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. We'll be back after a very short break. You are back with World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. China has launched the Shenzhou 22 spacecraft, the first ever emergency mission in the country's manned space program. The uncrewed capsule is delivering space food, medical supplies, and equipment to repair tiny cracks that are discovered in the window of the Shenzhou 20 craft. Shenzhou 22 will later serve as the return spacecraft for the Shenzhou 21 astronauts who are now working in orbit. For more, my colleague Xu Yawen earlier spoke with Dr. Zhang Fan, Associate Professor of Astronomy with Beijing Normal University.
Professor Zhang, could you first walk us through the background of this emergency launch? Why did China need to send the Shenzhou 22 spacecraft for the crew of Shenzhou 21?
Right. So basically, just before the Shenzhou 20 crew was supposed to return on their own spacecraft, they discovered that there's a small crack on their windows of the re-entry vehicle, and it's likely have been hit by space debris, a tiny one. It didn't go through, so the capsule is not leaking any gas or anything like that. However, the assessments after they looked more carefully at it, using, for example, robotic arms to look on the outside, the ground team determined it's probably not safe enough for people to actually sit in the craft on the re-entry, which would be quite violent and quite hot when it's rubbing against the atmosphere. So the Shenzhou 20 crew took the craft of the next rotation crew, Shenzhou 21 crew, their craft. They took that craft down. So now the Shenzhou 21 crew, they need additional sort of a return vehicle for their return in 6 months' time. And this is what this Shenzhou 22 launch is about, is to supply this replacement return vehicle.
When an incident occurs on a spacecraft, ensuring the safe return of taikonauts becomes a critical challenge. We have seen that in the past, similar incidents have happened in the space programs of the Soviet Union, Russia, and United States. In those cases, it took 9 to 10 months to bring astronauts back to Earth. But in China's case, the entire emergency launch process from initiation to execution took only 16 days. What's your assessment of China's space emergency response capabilities?
So China is quite careful when it comes to manned space missions. It in fact has these 2 launches ready in parallel approach, which means whenever there is a new launch of a new crew to go up for the next rotation, there would already be another rocket and another craft already on top of it, sitting in the factory sort of assembly line next to it. So the whole assembly plant at the launch site contains like 2 bays sitting in parallel. The whole purpose of that is precisely when there is some sort of emergency happening in the space station, they can launch almost immediately to take the astronauts back. In fact, the 16, they have 2 contingency plans. One is only taking 8 days. The other is 16 days. So this time they took the slightly longer one because the Shenzhou 20 craft, although it's not safe for return, it is perfectly safe to be a sort of a sanctuary in space, which means if something happens to the space station, the crew, the Shenzhou 21 crew that can't return right now, they can nevertheless escape into the Shenzhou 20 craft and just hide inside, not returning, going through the atmosphere. So that gives the opportunity for a slightly longer wait to for the new sort of Shenzhou 22 to be launched, which is why it takes 16 days. And the reason why you want to do that is because this way you can keep the Shenzhou 20 have it return and examine in more careful details and learn lessons from that for future missions.
Well, now let's focus on this very critical issue, the space debris. As human space activities expand, the amount of space debris in low Earth orbit has rapidly increased. So what are the main types of space debris currently orbiting Earth, and how serious is the issue?
It depends on the size. So anything larger than a centimeter, you can track them from the ground, and they've already been tracking sort of something nearly 1 million pieces of that flying around. And for those, each hit would well, anything larger than 10 centimeters definitely would be fatal, which means if the space station is in danger of hitting one of those, the space station would take active maneuvers, so it would raise its orbit or lower its orbit to avoid colliding with the debris. The problem is for very small debris, the debris could be just a paint peeling off from another spacecraft. And at that speed in space, tens of kilometers per second, even very tiny millimeter debris would cause a lot of damage. And for those, you can't track them. What you could do, and what Chinese station does, is to do extra shielding on vital components, pipes and pumps on the station. So you have aluminum sort of a shield, and then Kevlar sort of a line in the middle to protect, to basically prevent the debris from going through the shell.
So is that what the Chinese space station and Chinese spacecraft currently been doing to protect taikonauts and the space station and the craft?
Yes, and if you took notice of the spacewalks, a lot of the spacewalks were to install extra shieldings. Like they have been doing that for a few missions now. Part of the reason is because earlier there was a solar panel that was hit by a very tiny debris, and so they had to repair that. So the assessment is the situation of space debris is quite severe. So you need any sort of protection you can get.
Lastly, Professor, so given the growing threat of space debris, how do you think international cooperation can be strengthened to address this global issue? Like, what role can China play in promoting such cooperation, especially given this recent progress in space technology and emergency response?
Right. So basically, the problem right now is because space is international by nature. You don't have something like airspace concept sort of above your land sort of territory, because in space, the spacecraft has to travel around the Earth at high speed, so you can't just hover, which means anything related to space is international. So you really need international collaboration. But right now, there's no legally binding treaties, apart from some liability issues outlined in the Outer Space Treaty. Basically, if your debris causes trouble, you might be legally responsible for paying reparations. What people have been doing is the leading space agencies, including China, have this coordination among them, including exchanging information on the debris, on the monitoring. What China could do, and is currently doing, to push for further sort of collaboration is it has the capabilities and standards for sort of determining what kind of debris. For example, when you launch a rocket, how to prevent the components of rocket becoming harmful debris, how to deorbit things, how to remove rubbish from low Earth orbit. China has a lot of capabilities and has actually been testing sort of satellites with robotic arms to remove stuff from orbit. So what China could do for the future is to set the standards and try to push those standards to become international accepted norms. So everybody has to look after their craft in the same way and remove them from orbit once they are past their expiry. So that could be one way to go in the future.
Zhang Fan, Associate Professor of Astronomy with Beijing Normal University, talking with my colleague Xu Yawen. You are listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Some leading global commercial banks have projected that China's economy will maintain a trajectory of steady growth through 2026. Goldman Sachs now expects China's exports to expand by 5 to 6% annually over the next few years, more than double earlier forecasts, as Chinese manufacturers are gaining global market share in everything ranging from autos to semiconductors. The team within the Goldman Sachs has also nudged its forecast for China's real GDP growth this year from 4.9% to 5.0%. Analysts are expressing a positive consensus, anticipating that continued policy support, structural upgrades, and the unleashing of domestic potential will sustain China's economic momentum. For more, my colleague Zhao Yang spoke with Dr. Li Luan, assistant professor of economics with Peking University.
So, Professor Li Luan, recent annual strategy reports from some leading international financial institutions project that China's economy will maintain a trajectory of steady growth through next year. So, what is driving the more optimistic outlook for China's economy?
Yeah, so if you look at, for example, Goldman Sachs and other financial institutions, they're now, adjusting their expectation for China's, GDP growth. So basically, I think a lot of that is driven by the real export growth. So Goldman Sachs is expecting China's real export to grow 5 to 6% per year over the next few years. So this is basically, why it's adjusting its forecast for GDP to 5% for this year and 4.8% for next year. So I think part of the reason is that if we combine all of the so-called clean energy industries, that includes solar, EVs, batteries, and wind turbines, all of the green energies, green energy industries. So these industries will generate about 14 trillion yuan in 2024, which is over 10% of China's GDP. And also, I think more importantly, these sectors are estimated to be the fastest growing sectors in the future. So you have a huge chunk of GDP, and they're also the fastest growing sector in China. So this is basically what's fundamentally driving China's growth over the next few years. And also we're seeing a lot of clarity and support from the policy side, whether we're talking about the 15th five-year plan, also other government files. We're seeing that the government is putting a clear blueprint towards a more modern industrial system, tech self-reliance, and also raising the consumption rate. So basically, these all provide a very sustainable support for these advanced manufacturing, for these green energy sectors. So even though we have the property market or real estate market being a little bit of having a little bit of headwind, but now I think these would not be the main story, because new housing constructions are way down and property investments are going to be lower, so they're going to be contributing for a lower and lower share of the GDP in the future.
And what explains China's strong export performance this year despite the US tariffs and the global uncertainties?
Yeah, so I think most importantly are the high-tech exports. So, products like chips, semiconductors, and autos, which also include, batteries and other auto parts. They're growing very steadily, even though, US are putting tariffs on these goods. But also, some of the tariffs are temporarily, suspended. So basically, these are the exports that's driving or doing the heavy lifting for China's economy. But also, I think globally, there's a demand for clean technology, whether we're talking about EU or other sectors of the world. So this is basically where China exported a lot for its solar panels, its EVs, its batteries. Importers and investors are looking towards diversification beyond the US market. So we're seeing a lot of uncertainty and turbulence from the US side, but also I think for importers from Europe, from the ASEAN countries, I think doing trade with China provides a lot of certainty, especially on the goods that we have the comparative advantage in terms of manufacturing. And finally, I think China have the advantage of production of scale. We have a full supply chain. We also have a pretty automated manufacturing sector. If you look at our industrial robots, we are basically installing more than half of global industrial robots in 2024. So all of these reasons combined, I think this explains China's strong export performance, and I don't think it's a surprise. It's definitely something to be expected.
And the 15th five-year plan prioritizes technological self-reliance and upgrading in traditional and emerging industries. So which areas are likely to see the fastest gains?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think all of the technologies that surrounding clean energy are definitely going to see fastest growth. So whether we're talking EV and batteries, and also other sectors surrounding advanced manufacturing and also smart factories. So a lot of traditional factories is making, for example, furniture or clothing are being empowered again with the digital economics, with the platforms, with the new AI or new supply chain technology. So I think China have now a lot of intelligent factories that can cater to various demands. So, for example, if you're looking for furnitures with different designs or clothing with different designs, you can have one manufacturing plant that can cater to all of these different demands. And also, I think in terms of semiconductors and also core electronics devices, this is also going to be a fast growing area because China have a lot of innovation capacity for these new products. For example, we are seeing for the Double 11 shopping festival, smart glasses are actually having more than 300% growth over from last year to this. And also finally, I think everything related to AI, digital economy, also biopharma is going to be important as well because we're facing a aging economy, and our pharmaceutical companies are actually participating global cooperation to invent more medicines for the future, and that's also with the help of AI technology in terms of creating these early patents to collaborate with global companies. So yeah, so I think these are just a few of the potential sectors that's going to be seeing the fastest growth, but there's definitely going to be much more.
And for domestic consumption, how effective have trade-in programs and targeted subsidies been in stimulating the big ticket purchases like cars and appliances?
Yeah, I think the effect of China's trading programs and these subsidies have seen a very sizable effect. So our national trading campaign, according to a lot of statistics, have generated around 1.3 trillion yuan of sales in 2024, and about 920 billion yuan of these are spent in autos and 240 billion yuan in home appliances. So I think a lot of officials say these policies added more than 1% growth to overall consumption. Now, I think these home appliances sales is what I want to focus because they reflect some demand or desire to upgrade their consumption year on year. So we're seeing, for example, families upgrading their fridge, buying a new stove, or buying a lot of other electronic devices for their home, and this is basically evidence of people trying to upgrade or transform to their consumption from a low end or low quality goods to a more high quality consumption expenditure. But of course, there's some analysis saying that part of this is front loading. Basically, households are bringing their future purchases forward. But I think with new products and new goods being rolled out almost every day for the future, I think there's going to be a lot of potential demand to unlock.
And China is pushing measures such as elderly care, child care support, and also better social insurance. So how effectively will this help to reduce the precautionary savings and boost the consumption?
Yeah, so I think we have to look at the two sides. The first is from the income side. For example, we're going to see from 2025 that China is going to provide direct cash support to young families. So basically, for every child under 3, there's going to be 3,600 yuan per year for every child that's directly injected into the economy for young families. And also we're seeing measures to stabilize jobs and to formalize all of these benefits. All of these measures have a very clear policy goal, which is to raise the consumption share of GDP.
And China's moving up the value chain. So how do you see China's development in sectors like EVs, semiconductors, AI, and biotech? Are they going to be pillar for the economic growth in the long run? And what will be China's contribution to the global economy?
Yeah, so right now I think EVs, semiconductors, and AI, some of them, for example, EV and batteries, are already part of the pillar or a macro level industry. I mean, they used to be some so-called nice to have industries on the side, so they don't contribute that much to the GDP. But as I mentioned, all of these clean energy activities are already contributing over 10% of GDP in 2024. So they also contribute to a lot of the GDP growth. So I think in the future, AI and digital technology are definitely going from universities and institutions into factories, and that is going to be the next big thing, because all of these generative AI and embodied AI related, whether we're talking about patents, whether we're talking about robots and technology, if they are actually put into production, that's going to boost the productivity by a very significant portion.
Dr. Li Lun from Peking University talking with my colleague Zhao Yang. You are listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Sudan's Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, have announced a 3-month humanitarian truce in the country's civil war. RSF Commander Mohammed Hamadan Dagalo made the announcement on Monday. The warring Sudanese Armed Forces, or SAF, has not immediately confirmed that any deal had been reached. The SAF on Sunday rejected a ceasefire proposal put forward by Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States. SAF leader General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan took particular issue with the presence of the UAE. Fighting in Sudan has killed tens of thousands of people and displaced 14 million or even more. So joining us now on the line is Dr. He Wenping, Africa expert and senior research fellow with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, Professor He, first of all, what do you think has really prompted the RSF to announce what appears to be a unilaterally announced truce?
Well, I think probably there are several reasons behind this decision. Number one, we know that this RSF actually not accepting this deal reached by those partners like Saudi Arabia and also America and Egypt. But by now, if on the military battlefront, actually the Sudan, this government forces now actually is in the upper hand. So that is why we know the Sudan Rapid Support Forces, RSF, they want to use this unilaterally this truce to buy the time, and then maybe can help them to regroup and then to get a good this kind of resembling their forces. That is why they now unilaterally saying, okay, let's have 3 months this humanitarian this truce. This is the number one consideration. Number two, because we all know now recent those weeks and the international pressure has been put quite a lot on ISF, because there was a big mass killing has been taken place, even in a hospital. Those patients, even women and the kids now has been killed. So this one, internationally now saying have will do the independent investigation, and all the finger now goes to this RSF. So they are now under quite a lot of international pressure and quite now diplomatic isolation. So this consideration saying, okay, let's have a 3 months humanitarian truce is trying now to give a good image now, show to the international society, and then try to release those pressure on them, because that mass killing just taken place not long ago. I think those are the now from so far we think big two consideration, probably the the most one.
Yeah, thank you very much for putting this into this context. So, actually, when it comes to Sudan's civil war, including its mediators or the mediating forces, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and the United States have become known as the Quad. Not the Quad here in the Asia-Pacific region, but Quad in that particular context.
Right.
So why do you think the RSF seems to be more cooperative with this Quad than the other parties in this civil war?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. Because for the long time, the Sudan, this SAF, used to be the government in charge of the Sudan issue. They have been saying they are facing the unequal treatment. Seems those like U.S. and Egypt and Saudi Arabia, those mediators you just mentioned, this Quad, they are biased. This is a long time existing accusation coming from SAF. They think they have a biased opinion. They are not favor with Sudanese this government, even the Burhan himself. So that is why they're not accepting their mediation, even this role. So only the UAE somehow has some good relation. This channel can talk with this Sudan, this SAF. So this is a long existing one. They're not being trusted that much. Even for some time, they only trusted the South Sudan, saying we only accept the South Sudan to be the mediator because they used to be our brother, because before South Sudan got the independence, and then they are in the same country called Sudan.
Yeah.
So this is a mutual political trust is not there. Even the personal, this like to Burhan or whatever, they think those countries Quad has a biased opinion to himself.
So, in your observation, when we talk about this civil conflict, do you think it is essentially about power competition, power rivalry between General Dagalo and General al-Burhan? Why or why not?
Of course, this civil war basically talking is how to balance the power. Because both those Dagalo and Burhan, they have their own military supporting those group. They all have their own supporting those tribal those people. So because who is in charge for the power? Because not only Sudan, even before several years ago, South Sudan also happening the same story, exactly the same story. Because the resources, those two countries are very poor, only rely on the oil income. But now even the oil income is divided by these two countries. Even those two countries have to be cooperated. Otherwise, either of them cannot get any those oil revenue, because Sudan has the pipe and then South Sudan has the oil. So that is why this limited resources also becoming all those two parties are chasing for. If you got power, you got the military, you got the gun, and then they want to catch this income just within them by putting into their own pocket. So power relates with economic interests. So very tightly, especially in those countries, they have very limited resources. So both sides, they are not happy about those power sharing. You see, you get those key like minister jobs in the cabinet, and then you marginalize my party. Okay, they're not happy, and then.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very informative elaboration. Professor He Wenping joining us from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. That's all the time for this edition of World Today. I'm Ding He in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.